What does a President Trump election mean for the HVAC industry? In a recent video, we talked about several things that this will affect, possibly affect, and also the fact that other people were not elected and how that affects the HVAC industry. But one of the things we did not cover in that video is the fact that Trump himself sent a tweet, or X or whatever they're called these days, but he sent out a post that basically said he is going to impose strict tariffs on imported products, including many that are imported in the HVAC industry. And in this video, I want to cover some of that, some of the ins and outs and things that I think you should know. But I do want to preface this, as always, and say I'm not going to get political. I'm going to just state facts. A lot of folks try to comment on our videos and they'll say, oh, well, you're just being political by not being political. I have never shared my personal views on the channel. In fact, I'd probably surprise some folks with those views. But that said, I do think whether you do or do not like Trump, whether you do or don't like the incoming administration, there are some things that you should know as a consumer, whether you like them or not, that are going to affect you. We talked about a lot of that in that other video. You should definitely check that video out after this one. But the one thing we didn't discuss in that video is possible tariffs. Now, let's back up a little bit. In case you don't know what a tariff is, it's essentially a tax that's imposed on imported products. There's a little more to it than that, but that's the gist of it. And a lot of times when products are imported from other countries, whether it's politics or there's some other reason, politicians will sometimes impose tariffs on those products. It essentially usually will make those products higher in price in our country. Now, we could do tons of videos, I'm sure, on the ins and outs and the pros and cons of doing those sorts of things, specifically for the HVAC industry. If I were to go back in time a little bit, we saw this affect the HVAC industry years ago when Trump introduced tariffs on some of the raw materials, steel, and some of the other materials made to make HVAC systems. So that affected folks, whether they were having the products themselves or the raw materials imported to make these products. And we did see that affect pricing. And that was kind of across the board. Now, one of the interesting things I'll point out is the fact that the Biden administration also imposed tariffs on China. And some of those tariffs also had a direct impact on our industry. So I wanted to point that out because a lot of times folks on the left will sometimes say that's something Trump did and it ruined this and that, all this back and forth. We've seen both administrations take aim at China. Now, one thing that's interesting with that is we have seen China specifically, if we were to talk about that one country, we've seen them use tactics where they will import products into countries adjacent to the US, so in Canada or Mexico, and then import them into the country to avoid tariffs and things like that. Now, you might be saying, Josh, get to the point here. I am. Just hold on. I think there's some backstory here. On November 25th, 2024, a now President-elect Trump sent out a tweet where he said, as everyone is aware, thousands of people are pouring through Mexico and Canada, bringing crime and drugs at levels never seen before. Right now, a caravan coming from Mexico composed of thousands of people seems to be unstoppable in its quest to come through our currently open border. On January 20th, as one of my first executive orders, I will sign all necessary documents to charge Mexico and Canada a 25% tariff on all products coming into the United States and its ridiculous open borders. This tariff will remain in effect until such time as drugs, in particular fentanyl, and all illegal aliens stop this invasion of our country. Both Mexico and Canada have the absolute right and power to easily solve this long simmering problem. We hereby demand that they use this power, and until such time that they do, it is time for them to pay a very big price. So 25% he's announced there. He also, in other news, has announced a 10% increase to the tariffs that are already imposed on China. So some of those tariffs that are at, say, 25% will go to 35%. And so before I get to my advice, my thoughts on all of this, because I'm going to finally give an opinion. It's not political, but I do think there is something to be said here. I did go to some articles and some forums where different people were giving their advice. One guy wrote on one of the forums, tariffs won't work. And yes, the prices will be passed on to our customers. That's worse than the inflation we just tamped down. So some folks are not happy with this. Another guy wrote, this isn't really going to affect the way we do business that much. It'll affect prices. He wrote, demand for HVAC is somewhat inelastic, so people will pay no matter the price. Agreed. The customer is the one burdened. I know tariffs are already 25% on Chinese steel, supposed to go up to 60% now next year. Regardless, carry on, everyone. We will get through this together. What are your thoughts on all of this? This is interesting. My thoughts are this. Now, this isn't political. This is just for me as someone that is in this trade. I see many of the companies that have been around for years. They are companies that a lot of Americans think that they're buying American-made products just because they recognize the brand name, not knowing that brand has been sold a few times. That brand is probably now even possibly owned or invested in by folks that live outside of our country. And a lot of those companies specifically, I'm not going to mention any names, have diligently worked for years to send jobs either overseas or to Mexico. Meanwhile, we've seen other brands, including some that are brands that have been imported into our country, brands that started outside of our country and then came to our country and said, we're going to create American jobs, American infrastructure, and not have imported products. We're going to create the infrastructure there and take care of the folks that take care of us. And I'm not mentioning names, but there are some brands that they literally write assembled in America, if not made in America, right on the boxes and labeling and things like that. And for me, that played a big role on the brands that we decided to sell at our company. Like the tariffs or not, I think it's the companies themselves that decided to send jobs overseas, and now they want to pretend that, oh, well, it's some politician's fault, and that's why your prices are going to go up. I understand global economy. I understand there are times when companies have to do what they've got to do to produce, to make a profit, and all of that. But I also think there's something to be said for when the philosophy of a company is different. And the philosophy of a company is looking to take care of Americans while creating business in America. That's the brands that I'm going to usually look at. That's the brands that I want to take care of and have in my home. What are your thoughts? Love to hear them down in the comment section. The last video, it was interesting seeing different people with different perspectives on that. And if you like this video, I think you'll like that video right here where we talked about 5 changes that a President-elect Trump administration would have on the industry. Thanks for watching. Hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.